Colleagues, good morning. Welcome to our workshop on co-creating digital solutions. My name is Ali Hunter from YouthLink Scotland. It's great to see everybody here. As my granny would say, come away in. We're going to have a riot in the next 55 minutes or so. Joining me on that journey and bringing the riot. I'm delighted to be joined by Miona and Dan from Techtonic, and I have a pleasure to introduce them. Miona is Wellbeing Lead and Head of Charity Engagements, looks after all of Techtonic's charity work, has worked in many roles across the tech industry, as well as being a project manager and experienced user experience designer as well. Mio keeps us all to task, and when Dan and I step out of order, which happens frequently, Mio is the one that shepherds us very, very nicely back into shape and keeps us all going in the right direction. Dan is Head of Product and co-founder of Techtonic. He is one of the UK's hottest no-code developer, is a tech entrepreneur and a board game fanatic. I am absolutely dwarfed in their magnitude and brilliance. Colleagues, it's a delight to bring them to you this morning. So both work for Techtonic, who are a hyper-focused user research company who use this incredible research and insight to create meaningful digital products and experience. This programme today, we'll talk you through a Tech for Good programme that we at YouthLink Scotland have been working on with Techtonic. Without further ado, we will go on a little bit on the screen about where and how we will run through this morning. We'll talk a little bit about some of the big picture stuff around design thinking that we have gone through when we co-created some work. We'll have a look at each of those stages, and then we'll leave lots of time at the end for a Q&A. So my little bit at the start is just to highlight this idea of design thinking. What do we mean? What's involved? If we want to start somewhere, where might we start that journey? It's a really simple process to start with, colleagues. 3 steps. We need to listen, we need to connect, and we need to create, okay? We can think about this all day long. Unless we actually start doing something, it's never going to work. So we have to do that listening, we have to make those connections to the ideas, and we have to create. And what we're going to do in the next 50 minutes or so is we're going to work through those big ideas. And whilst we do that, Dan and Neil will talk this through. So what I'm going to do is keep talking, and then think about what I can open my window and throw at the person who's just started a big circular saw outside my window as I started to speak. So if I'm a little bit distracted, I am thinking about what I can throw. Dan, Neil, would you like to say hi first while I just try and figure out what's going on outside?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I am Dan. Ali gave us the best of intros, much better than I could do for myself. And yes, as Ali mentioned, I'm the head of product at Techtonic, and basically use design thinking to effectively create products and services that have the largest amount of impact with the least amount of risk. And the way you really do that is by asking the right questions, being super open to what your end users' needs are, and then building things with the least amount of risk possible in order for you to learn quickly. It's all about the faster you learn, the better your product will be. So you could take, or product or service, so you could take 12 months to kind of figure out what you want to do, or you could do it in a week. And if you do 52 of those weeks, your product will be better. Your service will be better because you've been learning and basing it off of your users' needs. So that's what we kind of believe in and what I do building. And then we've got Miona as well.
Yes. Hey, everyone. My name is Miona, also referred to as Mio. I have a background in UX and UI design, and now working primarily with well-being and charities and project management. Yeah, I'll keep it short. Dan took my time.
Awesome. Okay, colleagues, what we'll do, if my audio is bad, if somebody could just let me know, I've reconnected. There is someone cutting a giant concrete beam with a huge still saw outside my window right now. So I've had to go back on here. Colleagues, give me a shout if the audio's poor, and if I don't hear, I'll continue on as planned. So what we're going to do for this morning is we're going to have a look at the 3 stages of main areas of service design, and then talk you through practically how we do what we do in that space, with an idea that we can allow you to have a little bit of think in your own mind how you might approach a situation like this. So the first of the 3 stages that we're going to talk about today is the discovery phase. And in the discovery phase, we try and understand the problem and the value of solving it from the perspective of our users and our stakeholders. Now, brilliant link there to youth work. We're very, very comfortable as youth workers, starting from where our young people are at and trying to see the world through their eyes. So there's a brilliant synergy that we'll point out and we'll tie up as we go through these processes between service design and what we know and understand of youth work. So there are a couple of parts that I want to draw your attention to in the discovery phase that we have. So first of all is, can we identify the key assumptions to research and test? So one of the things that is really, really, really important to do is we make loads of assumptions. Young people might like this. The approach that we're taking is going to deliver X, Y, and Z. Young people are going to attend. It's going to be valuable. It's going to be useful. All these things are assumptions we don't actually know unless we have a time machine. If anybody has a time machine, please let me know. I would love to borrow it sometime and figure out how you can use it. We assume that this will work partly based on past experience, partly based on, I'm looking at the crowd in this room today, on your brilliance, because I know you are brilliant. But at the end of the day, we have a lot of assumptions in our work. We have to cast forward a lot of things that we think will happen. What this first discovery phase of service design does is actually says, look, hold on, slow down, stop. What assumptions are we making? And what can we do to reduce the risk of those assumptions? Let's research that and let's test that a little bit. When we do that, we identify gaps in our knowledge. So we have to then say, who can we bring in to help us? So we are ace as youth workers at doing lots of little bits of this. But as we heard Paul and Ali and the others talk about in the first sessions this morning, there are often big gaps in that knowledge that we don't know about, or we know a little bit about it, and there are others who might be able to come on that journey and help us and collaborate with us. So once we identify those knowledge gaps, we can try and figure out how we're going to solve them through research. Next up is so important that we have to try and understand what solutions already exist. So has anybody tackled the issue that we are trying to tackle before? What did they learn? What did they do? Who did they do it with? Can we learn anything from that process on the upside and on the downside? So then last up for this section, we've got to identify ideas and potential solutions to test in the next bit of our work. So we try and prioritize what are the bits that are really critically important to our journey. What are the bits that we have to figure out now? What are the bits that are absolutely those foundational building blocks? And we prioritize those over maybe the stuff that's a secondary, a third, or a fourth priority on the way. And it's really, really important to communicate at this point. We're going to be unsure about a lot of this process. So there's going to still be a lot of unknowns about how this works. And one of the things we'll keep coming back to in today's session is to underline that uncertainty, rather than being a weakness, rather than being a flaw in us or our work or a slight on our organisations, that uncertainty, that curiosity is the absolutely vital golden thread that runs through any co-creation product. That curiosity is what drives us to search out and to take the risk out of our assumptions as much as we can. It drives us to test as many ways as we can to solve and get creative solutions, and it drives us to create a better product. All of those little 1% is what makes something awesome. So super, super important as we do that. So that is our discovery phase in a nutshell. But rather than me just talk about some random bland idea that's kind of out there somewhere in the ether, I'm going to hand over to Dan to explain how we actually did this in a real life project with young people. Dan, over to you, my friend.
Oh my God, it's been 3 years of a pandemic and I still forget to take myself off of mute. It's terrible. But yeah, thank you, Ali. So just following on from what Ali was saying, the best way to kind of look at it is to look at it like you're a scientist. So you're trying to test things, you're trying to understand things. If you're wrong, it's not you're wrong, it's the assumptions that you're making were incorrect for you to learn from, or the process that you're trying to learn from will allow you to make better assumptions. So you're not wrong, the assumption is wrong. Okay, just to give you some context of what the project is, we are working with YouthLink and an organization called Passion for Fusion, and we are trying to build an application to help young ethnic minority people and refugees kind of deal with their mental health, because we know that it's difficult to be a kid in any way in this day and age, but also particularly for this group of young people. So we wanted to build an app, but I have thoughts. I used to live in Edinburgh, so I have thoughts about what it's like to be a Black person in Edinburgh. But I didn't want to make any assumptions about what we're doing. So what we did was we gathered the kids together and we wrote down all the assumptions and biases that we had. I have biases that from my lived experience or just from thoughts about how the world is, assumptions about how I thought young people would use this application, and then kept them aside. Then we asked open-ended questions, asking them open-ended questions about their own mental health, how they deal with life, what they do on a day-to-day basis. And we ask open-ended questions because you don't want to lead them down the path. You don't want to try something called confirmation bias, where you believe something. So you basically ask questions to get to that belief. So you don't want to do that. So you ask open-ended questions. We ask them, how do they currently deal with their mental health? And they don't even like the term mental health. Like in the process, we learned that it's like well-being, that mental health seems so big. We asked them what they liked playing with and why, because we want them to keep coming back to the application. And we got them to draw their ideas out, because as part of the co-creation process, it's important for them to feel like this is theirs. And to be honest, it is theirs. I had no preconception idea about what we were going to build. I came in with an open mind, like we're going to build this thing together. And then we also observed the way that they interact with each other. And what we noticed was there were louder kids in the group, there were quieter kids, there were people who really liked writing, people who really liked drawing. We were just lots of noticing about their behavior. And all of that we used as data to inform what we were going to do next. Cool. Ali.
So that is the practical piece where we start to join the idea to the reality of how do we make this happen for young people. But we know as youth workers, right, you're not going to expect on a workshop and to be sitting here coming along for the ride and be left comfortable. So we want you to get involved with this as well. We want to challenge you to have a think about a project that you're working on right now, where you can apply some of this learning for yourself. And because the first time we apply, it's always the hardest time, right? So if we can do that in the next 50 minutes, then you can take that next step on having already mastered a little bit of that journey for yourself. So I want you to have a little think about a project that you're working on right now. It could be a live project, it could be a project that's coming up in the next 6 months, or if you're not working on anything, make one up. It doesn't matter. It's that idea that you're working on something. And I want you to write down maybe 3 assumptions that you're making about that project. And what we're going to do, colleagues, is we're going to capture those assumptions. I've popped in the chat a link to an easy retro board, which is a little kind of flip chart type digital thing that we've got going on. But if you want to use your mobile phone, you can also use your mobile phone by scanning the QR code on the your mobile phone can be the companion. If you've got too many browsers open on your computer and you want to use your phone is also good. And personally, as one little sidestep away from this workshop, delighted, me personally, I am so happy that QR codes have finally come of age. I've thought they were a massively undervalued and underused resource for many, many years now, and I'm personally delighted to see that QR codes are like up there now. So you can scan that QR code and use your phone as your companion, and then just have a think. So just what are some of the assumptions that you're making about this bit of work, okay, that you just naturally are making? I'm going to pop on some tunes. We're going to take, let's take.
Very quickly, Ali, could I give some examples of the assumptions?
Perfect.
Yeah, so I assume young people want to deal with their mental health, right? Like if they don't, then the whole project is null and void. I assume young people want to use their mobile phone as opposed to a desktop. I assume young people have access to a mobile phone. I assume these young people have an understanding of their own mental health. So getting as granular as those actually helps you start thinking about what your project is. Like even the access piece, that came up to us after our first session, because some of the young people didn't even have a mobile phone that they could use for testing. So writing down your assumptions, breaking them down is a really critical part of this. So yeah, just wanted to share that, Ali.
Perfect. Okay, sorry, Dan, I was confused because there's carnage elsewhere in the workshop this morning. Some Zoom links have gone awry, I think. So hey ho, we're all good. Okay, colleagues. Any questions you've got, unmute yourself, give us a wee shout, and failing that, we'll take 3 minutes to write down what some of our assumptions are. Beautiful. Okay, Dan, I am having a little look at the Easy Retro board, and we are absolutely steaming through there with literally hundreds of brilliant assumptions that are made. Colleagues, am I right in thinking we might be done with that? Does anybody need some extra time on that, or am I right in thinking the volume that we've got in there suggests that we're pretty good? I'm hearing nothing back.
Just having a look now, and yeah, these are really great.
Okay, well, what we'll do is we'll just give it another 10, 15 seconds, so we'll draw this to a close. We're conscious we are rushing through this at breakneck speed, but we also are aware that we stand between you and your lunch. So, you know, we're measuring all of those things in the round, and we don't want to be the people that stand in front of your lunch. So beautiful.
One of the things that I noticed in the retro board is, yeah, they're really good. The more specific that you can be, the easier it is for you to determine whether you are right or wrong. So maybe rather than writing, say, the user, you would write the specific who the user is. Is it young people? Is it, I don't know, chefs? Like whoever the user is, or being as specific as possible actually helps you determine whether you are actually true or not, because you kind of don't want to be kind of true. Like you want to know whether you are true or not. So trying to make this as binary as possible.
So maybe what we can do, Dan, is if colleagues, if you think, have a little look for me at your stuff that you've put onto the Easy Retro board. If you can make that more specific, that's a challenge. It's a challenge back to you. Can you make that more specific? To edit the card, you just click on the three little dots in the corner, and it says edit card, and then the card becomes editable again. That's a challenge, direct challenge back to you, to say, can you make your assumption more specific? And what we're aiming for is that granular piece. What's the story? How many bouncy balls could you get in a swimming pool? How many basketballs go on top of the bouncy balls? How many tennis balls go in? How many? And then you get it down to grains of sand, and you know, we've got hundreds of millions of bits of things inside a container. So we're trying to get as granular as we can, so we can be as specific as we can.
People are powering through. Loving this.
Smashing it. It's real time. This is collaboration.
Real time.
We should put a name on this. Like, we should call this something funky and then tell it.
Absolutely.
For gazillions, and yeah. I won't put the kiss of death on it by trying to give it a creative name, because I realise that would be the kiss of death.
The tunes are really helping, or were helping.
Ben, mate, I'm just getting started. Wait, I'm going to ramp this up. By the end of this, we're going to be off our seats, and like hands are going to be in the air and everything.
Forget about lunch. That's just
Tunes, love it. All right, beautiful. Dan, can we maybe just try and ask for some of that feedback on some of those specific assumptions that have been made? Does anybody like to share with us?
Yeah, would anyone like to share their assumptions or any questions that they may have?
One of mine was that I assume that young people want to be creative, because that's something that we're very focused on with my work, about creativity, producing stuff, making their own creations and stuff like that. So that was one of mine. And it's not always the case that they want to be creative.
Yeah. So yeah, it'd be really good to understand, A, if they want to be creative, and then B, how do they want to be creative? And then also, why do they want to be creative? Because if you can set yourself up to be able to figure out why they want to be creative, how they want to be creative, and if you can then set up the environment for that to happen. So then you can start to kind of organize things in that way. But you want to make sure that you're finding it out from them and using their words. I tend to find that also when you ask people, your end users, the right questions, they give you all the marketing that you need, because you're talking to them in exactly the same way that they speak. They're like, oh my God, it sounds like you're speaking to me directly. It's because you said the words. Yeah, perfect.
Hi everyone, my name's Laura Gibson. I'm working with the Scottish Government on their Suicide Prevention Action Plan. Hi. We are looking at doing some innovation in this space, so we'll hopefully follow up with you after this. But we set up a discovery session with a working group which does include young people, But unfortunately on the day, the young people who were involved in that working group weren't able to make it. So we decided that we would just go ahead with a discovery session. And it was really quite active, and it came out with a lot of sort of statements about what we look to explore. And just out of curiosity afterwards, we caught up with the young people just to advise them what had happened in the session. And it was really funny because they actually, to the contrary, said none of those things were a concern for them. So it really hit home that they had to be involved in that discovery process as well, because we clearly went with our assumptions and thought that that was a real area that people were focused on and they needed that looked at. And actually when we spoke to the young people, they said, no, that's not an issue for us. Here's what. So it really just, as an example, plays right into into the space of we need young people involved in those discovery sessions.
Absolutely. I think it's also really important to create like these user profiles, because the more specific your user profile is, which is again also an assumption, but the more specific it is, the easier it will be for you to be able to determine whether people believe the same thing and whether you're right about the same thing. So like a broad spectrum of individuals, say from 13 to 30, you may have some assumptions about how they behave about a particular topic, but like between 13 and 18, they may behave in a different way than between 25 and 30. So having that specific, they may be the same as well, which is why we call them assumptions. But in order for you to be able to determine and test that, you want to make a guess about who I'm trying to reach and what my assumptions are about this specific group, and then go from there. But yeah, really great work. I think, yeah, assumptions abound.
Beautiful. Okay, colleagues, what we're going to do now, we're going to pass over to Mio to take us through our define stage, and we'll move to that next sphere. Super important.
Okay, so what we want to end up with is an iteratively developed solution that actually meets the user's needs, but also works for your organization and has the social impact that you want to see. And in order to do that, we would have to test all these riskiest assumptions and solutions. You might already have thought, oh, I know the perfect solution, but that might not be the actual case with the users. So figure out how you can quickly and in a very simple way test your riskiest assumptions. So something like rapid prototyping. You can even do, there's something as simple as just drawing out on paper what your assumption is. So if you have like, you can do a prototype on paper that looks like, oh, this is a mobile app, but just on paper, and then test it with the users to see, does it even resonate? Yeah, and that will be able to inform your next steps in the project. Yeah, and here it's like, does the solution actually help the users achieve what they want? How do we know this? How can we prove it? How can we test that it is working? And how will users even find out that we've developed this so they can start using it? Yep. And then Dan will tell you about how we did this.
Sure. So once we had done some done the workshop with the kids where we tried to understand how they looked at mental health, how they behaved, we gathered all of the data and our own observations. And then we noticed that there were 3 themes. So we thematically broke down all the things that we saw. And so normally you get like a bunch of things. Okay, what did they say? What did they write? What did they think? How did they behave? And then we noticed 3 things. We noticed that they liked to tell stories. They were always talking about things that they've done. They might have been super mundane or they might have been really like impressive, but they loved to tell stories. They loved to draw. They were always like drawing. Whenever we asked them to draw anything, they would just leap into it. And that was regardless of the age range as well. that they liked to draw to like share their thoughts, and they liked to learn. What we noticed was that they liked to understand things, but it wasn't in the way that you would typically think about learning via school, but it was more like they took on things themselves to try and understand. And so thematically, out of all the things that we saw, we were like, okay, these are the 3 themes. They like to tell stories, they like to draw, they like to learn. So based on that, we decided to build 3 little micro apps, which were just like 1 or 2 feature apps, in order for us to learn how do they like to tell stories? How do they like to draw? How do they like to learn? Why do they like to learn? Why do they like to draw? And rather than building based on everything that we saw, rather than building one large app at the end, we were like, okay, this is what we think it is. We're trying to de-risk everything. What's the least risky way of building something that we know will have the impact that it needs? Okay, we noticed a few things, let's test them out, and then let's build those, then learn from that, remove some risk, and then build again. So that's how we did that. So in the next
could I just quickly jump in? So the reason why we actually made little micro apps is because Dan can do that really fast and quickly. Quickly and simply. But you could also just draw up some things in a program in like, I want to say Paint, but don't do that. In Figma or Sketch or something that are just basically still images, and then you can put them all together and make it clickable in one of these programs. What is it called again, Dan?
What program?
That program where you can just like it's a software online where you can just say, if you click on this button, then it goes to this other picture. InVision. Yeah, InVision. So there are other simpler ways to do it if you're not like a no-code champ.
But I guess the other thing as well is by the micro apps, thematically, what I mean is, and that's a great point, well, thematically as well, what I mean is, rather than say, for example, if you make delicious burgers, you make delicious vegan burgers, rather than trying to get enough money to have 100 restaurants all around London and all around the world, you might start off with your kitchen and make some burgers for your friends and see whether they like them or not. And then you might go to do a food stall and then test whether people actually want to buy these burgers or not. And then you might go and start up in a kitchen, in a pub somewhere, go from there. And then you might have one store, one restaurant, and then you might try and go to 10, and then you might scale up from there. And each way you're minimizing your risk. If you make these burgers for your friends and they're like, these are delicious, that's great. If they're like, these are terrible, but this is what you could do to improve them, that's what you do. So it's about what's the realistic, practical way of you minimizing your risk by building something super small so that you can learn really quickly. Do my friends like my vegan burgers? Yes. Awful example before lunch. I apologize. You could clearly tell that I am hungry as well. So yeah, we'll be zipping.
Dan, I was not hungry before you gave that example. And now I think I might be very hungry before the end of this session. Okay. Colleagues, it's worth bearing in mind this as well, that, you know, try and tie this back to youth work and how we develop digital products, but also it can be tied into our own practice. You know, some of that face-to-face stuff we do. It's not all just, this stuff doesn't just have to be about creating a digital product, can be about a hybrid product, can be about anything. We can bake some of this into our planning. We can strengthen the way that we plan our projects, we plan our sessions by asking that question. You know, what are you assuming? How do you know that? What is a fact? You know, what's a fact that supports the assumption that you're making or the idea that you're making, and trying just to build in that way of really kind of quickly testing what it is that we want to do. And as Laura had mentioned before, it's all right discovering new ideas about what our young people are thinking. That's probably the easiest part. Trusting them is a much bigger part. So what goes alongside this process is an absolute commitment to valuing the work of our young people. One of the things that we've done better than anything else in this whole project that we're working on with Passion for Fusion is hold that space open for the young people without any judgment, without any preconceptions of what the end product might be. Our job is to hold that space open for them and absolutely 100% value what they bring to the table. And that will sometimes defy conventional wisdom and will make us feel different from other solutions that are already out there. That's okay, because we have the data to support that. We have the user stories to support that. We have the experience to support that. And that's part of what this project is all about for us, is to try to challenge some of that status quo where we just hop, skip and jump over that first bit of the discovery process lots of the time in youth work. And we make all these big assumptions about what our young people want and what they need. If the approaches that we're taking actually have the desired effect, and we go off and we spend what is becoming, you know, a very finite pool of resources. So we have to spend the resource well. We have to make sure that that's all working up. So Dan, do you want to talk us through this practical activity? And I'll
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So based on the assumptions that you've written down already, how can you quickly and cheaply prototype this? How can you quickly and cheaply test this? So what you want to think about is whether it's a digital product, whether it's a service, what is the simplest way that you can figure out whether this assumption is correct or not? Is it about getting people into a room and getting them to do something? Is it about creating a landing page and trying to get people to sign up? Is it about trying to doing a survey and asking them questions and trying to look at the data? Like, what's the simplest way that you can try and figure out whether your assumption is correct, incorrect, or kind of correct? And if it's kind of correct, where is that delta? Where is that gap between the right and wrong? And you can use paper, you can use a physical space, you can make something like you can build a one-page website. Like, what's the tiniest thing that you can do in order for you to test those assumptions with your end user? Cool.
3 minutes. Is that okay, time-wise, to do that?
Yes.
Let's do 3 minutes. Okay, so how did we get on with that? If you haven't committed those ideas onto the Easy Retro, if you could pop those up now, that would be magic.
Awesome. And while that's happening, I will read some of these and maybe give some feedback, unless anyone has any questions, actually. Does anyone have any questions? Because this is difficult. So this is a challenging piece of work. So don't worry if you struggle with this. Like, this is actually quite difficult because you're trying to break down the assumptions into like an element that's testable. So the reason why you may have found it is difficult is because it's difficult. So don't worry about that. If you have any questions, jump through and ask me, or I will go through some of the ones on the retro board and give some feedback. Cool. So we've got surveys and focus groups with young people to get their feedback. So that's a really good one. I would probably try and break that down into, it's almost two different ones, right? There's surveys and then there's focus groups. One challenging thing with focus groups is that you tend to get individuals like me who are quite loud, who may sway a group. So, and then you get an element of groupthink that happens within. Someone might say something and then someone's like, oh yeah, that's kind of true. And then before you know it, like, it's not actually what people actually believe. They're just kind of like going with the crowd. So we tend to try and avoid focus groups if possible, of course, and try to get individuals on their own to answer the questions, and then you could do the analysis afterwards. And that accounts, so that discounts loud people like me, like and gets more of the introverts, information from the introverts as well, or people who might be shy. But yeah, surveys and focus groups are a really good way to test those assumptions, especially with open questions. So a conversation with all the different groups involves to check out their understanding. So yep, that's a good one. What you want to do is, again, figuring out the specifics of who these different groups are, and also have a understanding of what that understanding should be or could be, so that you know whether it's kind of aligned to what you think or it doesn't think. I don't think. Earlier engagement with our youth stakeholders. So yeah, a good one as well. I'd love to know what you mean by engagement, or what that engagement could be. Again, the specificity, I can't believe I said that right first time around. That specificity of what that engagement might look like would probably help determine whether you are correct or not. And yeah, we've got a similar kind of thing with like small scale events. Like, what could those events be? And also the understanding of why are you doing those events specifically over other ones, in order, and what are you trying to learn? This everything that you're doing here is basically based on what are you trying to learn. Engage at first opportunity to clarify back to basics with paper-based questionnaire, and also show QR codes to online survey forms. Yep. So yep, questionnaires. And one thing with questionnaires is, so if you're doing face-to-face interviews, asking open-ended questions is probably the best. If you're doing questionnaires, then closed-ended questions is best, because it's easier to figure out the data aspect from a closed questionnaire. So as in, do you, this is, unfortunately, I'm thinking about food, so apologies, but do you like burgers, fish and chips, haggis, soup? That's a different, that will get you a different answer than if you say, what foods do you want? So it's easier to do more statistical data analysis on closed-ended questions, but you might not get the full breadth of what you actually need. So face-to-face, if you ask open-ended questions, you get more. You can always delve deeper. Why is this occurring? Cool.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. I am watching your time because I'm conscious you have to disappear in 10 minutes time. So we're going to keep this sharp as well. So colleagues, last area we're going to look at this morning is, once we have been through the two stages we've detailed now, it's this idea of development. We move into that final stage. We've worked through our ideas and developed a working solution that meets our users' needs in a way that works for our organization, and it has the desired impact that we are trying to have, right? And we know that because we've tested it. We have some data that backs up those assumptions. What are the elements that we have to think about when we're in that final development stage? So we have to develop a working solution to meet the needs of our end users, okay? It's really, really simple, nice and straightforward, nothing too complicated there. We have to turn our prototype into the simplest possible end-to-end solution that can be delivered. Okay, there's no point shooting for the stars if we've only got 2 weeks and a few £100. It's try and make your product sustainable in terms of what you want to do and how you want to do it, and the time you've got and the resource you've got available. Number 2, establish how that solution will be delivered and sustained. So important that we understand how we bring that product to life and how we sustain it afterwards. So often we forget about that sustaining bit. How do we drive people to it? If we create the best product in the world, but we don't do any thinking about how we can connect it with an audience, then it's no use for us. We then also have to tell the story, the evidence of how that solution meets our users' needs, and share the results. Reporting on what we've measured and proven value of our solution is so important. We've got to try and understand the results of those tests. That is super helpful for when we try to bring others onto that journey with us as well. So think about future funding, think about those that we're trying to influence. If the young people are telling us, actually, our experience now is very different from what everything else out there is delivering, we're not going to influence anybody unless we can tell that story properly. Okay, so we're going to give a real bit of thought on how we tell that story from the evidence base that we've got. Dan, over to you, my friend.
Yeah, awesome, thank you. So very quickly, we built these 3 micro products with no-code tools, as Mio was mentioning. The one that I used was a tool called Bubble, which is very complicated, but there are some other ones that allow you to get something up and running really quickly. We got the young people to play with the apps to learn what the real app should be. So I knew that the 3 things that we were making were wrong, and everything that I'm doing is probably wrong. But as soon as you use the evidence from the kids, you actually end up making the right thing. And also the focus was always on trying to learn what was engaging, what did they hate, what questions were they asking, in order to make the product better, and also to understand from a top level view, like what's the story that we can be telling in order to try to get more funding to build something even more impactful. And then we also worked with YouthLink and Passion for Fusion at every step of the way to ensure that the app met their needs too. So I think that there are always different stakeholders within your the product or the service that you're trying to build, and understanding the needs of those and involving them early means that when you get to the end, there's not a big surprise. Like you're just they're along with you on the journey. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got our final piece of challenge for you, colleagues. Do you want to, can you explain this, Dan, while you're still here, rather than me? That's easier, I guess.
Yeah, sure. So if you've got an idea about your solution based on the questions that you may have asked, your riskiest assumptions, what your prototype might look like what would a solution look like that you would try and put in front of your end users for them to be able to tell you what's wrong with it? What's the simplest thing that you could do, and can you draw that out? So, or describe it. What is this simplest thing that you could do in order for you to learn what's wrong or what's right? And can you describe that in 10 or so words? And the reason why the describing it in 10 or so words is important is because it gets you to simplify. There's always people, all of us, tend to overcomplicate things by having too many words, and really simplifying something down gets to the essence of the idea. So can you sketch this out or write down in its simplest form in 10 words or less, what's this solution to this, the assumptions that you've made? And yeah, I think that's
cool. Should we go for 3 minutes again? We're doing a speed round.
Absolutely.
All right, let's do it. 3 minutes. Okay, so that is our 3 minutes up. We've got some great examples up there.
Awesome. Yeah, again, really difficult. I was writing my example, and it took me the whole of the time to keep rewriting it to get it to the right amount of words. So again, it's a very difficult activity to be able to either understand what you should be drawing and also how to describe what you're doing as well. So print a questionnaire with optional QR code, link to anonymous online surveys, speak to each person one-to-one, a few pages. Yep, these are really good. Giving young people multiple options. And one thing that would be really good as well is trying to think about the outcome. Like, what is the outcome that you, what's the outcome that you expect as well? Because again, that outcome is an assumption. Like, for example, with the outcome for our mental health app, it's improving the mental health of the young people. I assume that by using our app, their mental health and well-being will be improved, but that's an assumed outcome. So understanding what the outcome is of your product or your service is also important in order for you to understand what your assumed product or service should be as well.
Cool. It's worth saying as well, Dan, like one practical example of one of the ways that we've met that challenge from a data perspective and from a research perspective in the development of this project is that we've shaped or our aspiration is to shape as much of the product itself along the architecture of cognitive behavioural therapy. So it's those three elements. So we know we're basing what the app is trying to achieve in terms of its impact around a tried and tested methodology of engaging with or creating positive mental health. So we've built that on, and then what we've done from that perspective in terms of how we can tell the story next is we've built in and hardwired into our product a user, the ability for other users to understand what we're doing. So if we can mention to the NHS who work the clinical guidelines, well, actually, this is based on CBT, and here is where, how, and why it is in this product, and this is how the user journey supports that. This is the assumptions that supports that. Then they can take that as a right. Okay, we know we're working with you. If we're looking for funding, we have to demonstrate how do we know this works. We can lean very, very heavily on the data that's produced by CBT as an approach. So we're not just trying to do everything ourselves here. We're leaning on the incredible data that exists out there already. We're leaning on current good practice that is currently present in Scotland and across the UK right now. So we're not doing it all ourselves in that space.
Yep, it's also a great way to minimise your risk as well, which is what we're all about.
Perfect. All right. So, colleagues, we're aware of two things. One, we've asked you to work really damn hard in just less than 50 minutes. This is maybe a day, a couple of days worth of work, right, to go through this bit by bit by bit. So thank you very much, just even for bearing with us on that. It's a huge ask that we're doing. We hope you can share some of the ambition that we've got around that, and actually some of the ways that we can improve all of our practice, be it the co-creation of digital work or the co-creation of work in person, or a mix of the two, which is more often than not part of the way that we work now. And lastly, from my perspective, I'd like to share this picture with you. And this picture is probably a more accurate representation of the process that we've been through here with our design thinking and our co-creation with the young people we've worked with on this project. They inspired us at the start. It was their stories. We held the space open for them to tell us their story. And they inspired us by that. We got a real sense of who they are. We got a real sense of where they were coming from. We got a real sense of the absolutely profound challenges that they face in their daily lives. That was then moved fully into that whole ideation phase, that whole ideas and testing phase, where we represented back to them what they had told us in ways that we can test and build prototypes around and test and build prototypes around, and test and build prototypes around again and again and again to get it right, to make sure we are absolutely certain that what the young people are telling us, and we responded back to them, is as low risk and as high quality as we absolutely can. And now we're in this final stage of putting this, I say we, Dan is in this final stage of bringing this to life in a no-code space, where we're going to, work really, really, really hard on how we tell the story of this process and product. We're going to test it fully with the young people again, and make sure that even in this final late stage in the process, that we are able to represent their ambitions as best we can, and then work damn hard on getting that out to as many young people as we can. And one of the brilliant bits about a no-code solution is that it's very, very low risk for us in lots of ways, that we can make changes relatively simply compared to hardwiring and building a product from scratch. So Dan, have you got any more? Miona, have you got any more for us on final thoughts?
From my point of view, yep, Ali was perfectly right. And the way I love this diagram, because it looks like a mess, and it's because it is messy, but there is order to this mess, which is basically around trying to learn as much as possible. So you're always looping around, and if you make a mistake, it's fine, because as long as the people that you're working with and care for are safe, you're learning the things that you need to learn as quickly as possible, so that you can make something impactful that is meaningful for them.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I think one last thing is to say that this is actually the least risky way of going about a project.
Yeah, you could.
Because you're making sure that you're constantly on the right path, and even if you start deviating a little because of the test, that will push you back on the right path.
Absolutely.
To something useful that the users will actually use.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right. I'm conscious of everyone's time, but we also want to leave a little bit of time open at the end for any questions that you have, colleagues. So I'll turn the floor over to you if you have any questions.
You guys actually end up making?
Sorry, what was that?
What did you guys end up making?
Sure. So we're actually still in the process. So we've built the 3 little micro apps. So one of them was a drawing app that allowed young people to draw their feelings. Another one was an app that allowed the young people to tell their story and pick a GIF about how they feel. And another one was an app that allowed them to be able to get meditations or mindfulness memes based on how they were feeling. And they liked some of them a lot, so there's some of them they hated, and we're mishmashing them all into building a less risky version and a smaller version of the next version of the app based on the feedback that we got. So yeah, we're currently in the process right now and mixing in the CBT stuff to make it something that is useful for them. So yeah.
Well, very cool. Everyone loves a GIF then.
Sorry?
Everyone loves a GIF.
Everyone loves a GIF, especially me. GIFs and emoji are like my language.
Yeah. And we are the group is 11 to 14-year-olds, so big hit.
Nice.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Colleagues, any more questions? I'm going to hold the boundaries of time really firmly here, because we have to be back for this afternoon session relatively quickly, so I don't want to do any more. Our contact details are here. If there are any further questions, conversations you want to have with us, please do get in touch. We would be more than happy to chat through anything that we have. And